The Mafia boss married her for a $5 million bet, but her transformation left him speechless. Nobody ever looked at Nadia twice. That was just a fact of her life. She was the kind of woman who could walk into a room and leave it without anyone noticing she had been there at all. She worked at a public library in Chicago. She wore simple clothes. She kept her hair tied back. She ate her lunch alone on a bench outside and read whatever book she had borrowed from her own workplace that week. She was 28 years old, and she had never been anybody special to anyone. She was not unhappy, but she was invisible, and she had learned to live with it. Rayan Moretti did not know her name. He did not know her face. He only knew a photograph, blurry and taken from a distance, that his enemy slid across a poker table on a cold October night in Manhattan. And in that moment, without meeting her, without knowing a single thing about her, he turned her life upside down. The man who started all of this was called Zafar. He and Rayan had been rivals for years, two powerful men circling each other with careful smiles and careful words, each waiting for the other to make a mistake. That night, Zafar had lost money, and losing made him do something stupid. He pushed the photograph forward and made a bet. The deal was simple. Rayan had to marry the woman in the photo, a complete nobody from a regular neighborhood, and within 18 months, she had to look like she belonged in his world. Not just dressed up, not just polished. She had to walk into any room full of powerful people and hold her own. If she did, Zafar would pay $5 million. If she failed, Rayan would hand over a valuable piece of property that Zafar had been after for years. Rayan looked at the photograph for a few seconds. He did not feel anything about it. He did not feel pity for the woman. He did not feel excited. He did not feel nervous. He just saw a move on a board. He accepted. What he did not understand yet was that the woman in that photograph had nothing to prove to him. She never did. Nadia found out about the offer through a lawyer she had never met before. The man sat across from her in a coffee shop and explained things very calmly. A contract marriage. 18 months. She would keep her own room, her own life as much as possible. In return, her late father's debts, more than $180,000 of them, would be cleared. She would also receive a monthly payment. She asked the lawyer if this was real. He said yes. She asked him who the man was. He told her. She had heard the name Moretti before. Everyone in Chicago had, though she had never had any reason to connect that name to her life. She went home and sat at her kitchen table for a long time. She thought about her father. She thought about the letters that kept arriving from collection agencies, the ones she had been trying to answer for 3 years since he passed. She thought about how tired she was of carrying something that was not her fault but had somehow become her entire life. Then she called the lawyer back and said yes. Moving into Rayan's apartment was strange, in a way that was hard to describe. It was not uncomfortable exactly. It was just enormous. High ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture that looked like it cost more than her car. A woman was brought in to help her with her wardrobe. Nadia listened politely and then made her own choices. Quiet ones, nothing too dramatic, just clothes that fit well and suited her. Rayan set the rules on day one. Public events together, a few per month, polite conversation when needed, no arguments in front of people, no personal questions, no emotional involvement. He said all of this in about 4 minutes, and then went back to his desk. Nadia nodded and went to unpack her books. The first weeks were quiet. They barely spoke. He worked late. She read. Sometimes she could hear him on phone calls in another part of the apartment, his voice low and calm, always in control. She cooked for herself, and occasionally left something on the kitchen counter without saying anything. Once, she came back, and the plate was empty and washed. She did not mention it. Neither did he. The first event they attended together was a dinner for a city official. Nadia wore a deep blue dress she had chosen herself, and did her own hair. She was not nervous, which surprised her. She had always been invisible before, but invisible people learn to watch carefully. And she had spent years watching how people talked to each other, what they actually meant versus what they said, where the real conversations happened in a room. She ended up seated next to a man who worked in city politics, someone who spoke in a loud, confident way about things he clearly only half understood. Halfway through the main course, he made a comment about a historical event that was simply wrong. Not a small error, a big one. Nadia corrected him, gently, with 3 sentences, and a specific detail that shut the conversation down completely. He stared at her, Then he laughed, a surprised real laugh, and said he would have to remember that. Rayan was sitting 3 seats away. He heard everything. He said nothing to her about it on the ride home, but something had shifted slightly in the way he looked at her when they walked in the door that night. Over the following months, things started to happen that nobody had planned for. One of Rayan's most trusted men, a serious, quiet person named Tariq, who had worked for the family for 15 years and was famously hard to impress, started stopping by the kitchen when Nadia was in it. At first, he pretended to be looking for something. Then he started just talking. She gave him advice about a problem with his daughter. Nothing dramatic, just honest, clear words. He started going to her with other things too. Small things. Real things. A woman at one of the events, the wife of a businessman Rayan had dealings with, cornered Nadia near a window one evening and started asking her questions. Not polite party questions. Real questions. About books. About what Nadia thought about things. About life. They talked for 40 minutes. By the end, the woman had given Nadia her personal number and said they should have lunch. Nadia said yes. She meant it. Nadia had also quietly gone back to her old volunteer work, helping women at a shelter near the neighborhood she had grown up in. She had done this before the marriage, and she kept doing it now. She helped one woman draft a legal document for a custody case. The case went well. Word spread, the way it does in communities where people actually look out for each other. People started recognizing Nadia's face. Not because of Rayan, because of her. Rayan noticed all of this. Slowly, the way you notice water rising when you were not paying attention to it. He found her books once, the ones she had on her nightstand, with small sticky notes stuck to certain pages. Not just notes about the story. Notes where she had written down her actual feelings about a character, what she thought they were scared of, what she thought they really wanted, underneath what they said they wanted. He stood there reading them for longer than he meant to. He saw her come home one night looking drained and quiet. She had been at the shelter. She did not say anything about what had happened, just made tea and sat at the kitchen table with her hands around the cup. He walked past twice before he sat down across from her. He did not ask what was wrong. She did not explain. They just sat there until the tea was finished, and somehow that was enough. He started paying attention to the little things, how she always remembered the name of the person who served them at restaurants and said thank you to them directly. How she had learned some Italian words, and he caught her practicing them quietly to herself. How she never asked him for anything extra, never pushed at the walls he had built, never seemed to want to reshape him into something else. She just existed next to him, completely and fully herself, and he did not know what to do with that. His mother met Nadia at a family lunch, and afterwards, when Rayan drove her home, said only, "She is a real person, that one. Keep her." His mother did not usually say things like that. He did not answer her. It was 14 months in when Nadia found the document. She was not snooping. She was looking for a pen on his desk, because her own had run out, and she was in the middle of writing something. The paper was right there. She picked it up to move it, and her eyes caught the words before she could stop them. Her name, the bet, the 5 million, the property, 18 months. She read the whole thing standing there. Then she put it back exactly where it had been. She finished writing what she had been writing. She made dinner. She went to sleep. In the morning she packed one bag. Just the things that had been hers before any of this. Her books. Her one good coat. The small photograph of her father she kept on her dresser. She left a note on the kitchen counter. It said, "I was your bet. You were my mistake. I hope it was worth 5 million. Then she left. Rayan found the note at 6 in the morning. He stood in the kitchen for a long time. He called Tariq, who picked up on the second ring, and said simply, "She is gone." Tariq said, "You already know where she went." Rayan hung up and called his mother instead. His mother listened to him say 3 sentences, and then told him he had done something stupid that she had been waiting for him to do for years, and hung up on him. He called Zafar. He told him to transfer the 5 million. The bet was over. Zafar asked if she had walked out. Rayan said yes. Zafar sounded almost amused. Rayan ended the call and sat in the apartment that still smelled faintly of the cardamom tea she made every evening. He sat there for a long time. And in that silence, without anyone to perform for, without anything to calculate or control, he started to understand things he had been refusing to look at. He thought about his younger sister, who had died when she was 20, and how he had spent 16 years building walls around that grief and calling the walls strength. He thought about how Nadia had never once tried to climb those walls or break them down. She had just been so completely and genuinely present that the walls had started to feel unnecessary. He had not noticed that happening. He wished he had. He thought about how every person in his world who respected him more in the last 14 months, and there were several, respected him differently now, warmer, like they saw something in him they had not seen before. He knew where that had come from. He had just refused to name it. He found her 3 days later at the shelter where she volunteered. He had asked Tariq, who knew, because she had called the shelter the day she left, and told them she was available to come back full-time for a while. He walked in on a weekday afternoon. She was in the middle of helping someone with paperwork. He waited. He sat on a plastic chair in a hallway with bad lighting and a coffee machine that made a noise every few minutes. He waited for 2 hours. When she came out and saw him, she stopped. She looked at him for a long moment. She did not look angry, which was almost worse. She looked tired and steady at the same time. He said, "I am not here about the bet. I am here because I do not know how to be in any room you are not in anymore, and I have been in a lot of rooms." She looked at him for another moment. Then she sat down in the plastic chair across from him and said, "Then talk. All of it. From the beginning. No performance. Just the truth." He talked for 3 hours. It was the most honest he had been since his sister died. Nadia did not go back with him that day. She gave herself 60 days. She was very deliberate about this. She was not punishing him. She was making sure that any decision she made came from a clear head, not from loneliness or habit or the strange pull of a life she had gotten used to. She used those 60 days well. She finished a funding application for the shelter that had been sitting half done for months. She called her mother in Tehran, something she had not done enough. She started writing, something she had always wanted to do but never given herself permission to. She wrote about her father, about the debt, about the library, about walking into a world that was not made for her, and finding out she could hold her own in it anyway. On the 61st day, she called Rayan. She told him she wanted to talk about what came next, not about going back to how it was, about something different, something real. He said yes before she finished the sentence. They got married again 6 months later. A small gathering. His mother, her mother, who had flown in from Tehran and spent the first evening asking Rayan very direct questions about his intentions, 2 of Nadia's closest friends, and Tariq, who stood at the back with his arms crossed and looked satisfied in a way nobody mentioned. There was no stylist this time. No event planner. Nadia wore something she had bought herself from a small shop near the shelter. Rayan wore a suit he had owned for years. The 5 million that had transferred from Zafar sat in an account for a while. Eventually, Nadia donated a large part of it to the shelter, anonymously. She did not tell Rayan right away. When he found out, weeks later, he laughed. A real one, the kind he did not use in front of people, and said, "You donated the bet money," she said. "Someone might as well get something good out of it." He learned to make the cardamom tea. It took him 4 tries to get it right. She was patient about this. She kept writing. Eventually she would publish something, a long piece about invisible women and what the world misses by not looking, and it would reach more people than she expected. But that came later. What mattered, in those ordinary evenings in the apartment that had once felt so cold and formal, was simpler than any of that. 2 people sitting with tea, a book open on her side, his laptop on his. The quiet kind of life that nobody makes movies about, but that people spend their whole lives trying to find. He married her to win a bet. He stayed because he finally understood what he had been missing. And she never needed his world to see her. She just needed someone to stop and actually look.